All right, so tonight is a continuation of this morning, so we'll have to pick up with what we started this morning. And what we started with this morning had nothing to do with the lesson, so we'll do that again tonight. We'll start with something that has nothing to do with the lesson. Romans 12, verse 12. Romans 12:12. In Romans 12, you find that you're not supposed to be like the world. You're supposed to be transformed. You're supposed to have a new mind. Then he goes on and he tells you that everybody has different gifts, and we're not all going to have the same gift. They're going to differ. However, then he goes on and says there's some things everybody has and is a requirement. That's in verse 12. Rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer. Those last two are easy to do. Not easy, but easier than the first. Patient in tribulation. We can be patient in tribulation, and a lot of times we'll tell everybody about it, how patient we are during this tribulation. That's not really being patient in tribulation. But, we'll maybe slide by on that one. Continuing in prayer. Oh, we pray about a lot of things, but then we don't leave it at the throne of grace. We take it back when we leave. We're not really depending on him to answer it. So the other two can easily be faked. This first one is more of an internal thing that you've got to get. You should get it as soon as you get saved, and then you should continue, and that should build. This one will enable you to do the other two. Rejoicing in hope. You have a hope that regardless of what goes on, when your day falls apart, you should have a hope you can pull up that fast and you can rejoice in when everything else is not rejoice worthy. We saw in 1 Thessalonians 5:16, the command is rejoice evermore. So we're supposed to rejoice evermore. The way we do it is found in Romans, in hope. So there's a hope you can rejoice in. Go to 1 Thessalonians 5. 1 Thessalonians 5. For you, there's a million you could choose, but you need to find a verse that you can nail down and use as your hope. I'm going to show you mine. 1 Thessalonians 5, look at verse 16. Rejoice evermore. That's a good one to memorize. 2 words. If you forget one of the words, you're in bad shape. Rejoice evermore. And it won't take you long to memorize that one. That's a good one. But my verse that gives hope is verse 24. Faithful is he that calleth you, who also will do it. That'll get you out of a mess. God's faithful. Are you doing what he called you to do? Then he'll finish it, not you. That's a good one. I like that one. I use that one. So, whatever it is, if you're going to work, if he's given you that job and you know from God that's your job to do, then he called you. That's your calling. And everything's falling apart at your job, doesn't matter. Who's gonna fulfill this job? If it's your calling from God, God will do it. Who will also do it? The same one that called you to it. Okay, so that's the one I use. Find you a verse. Find something that you can depend on every time there's a problem, or else you'll constantly be up and down with, I got hope, I don't have any hope. I'm happy, I'm not happy. So to even that thing out, you got to have rejoicing evermore. To rejoice evermore, you got to have hope. To have hope, you got to find a verse that says you can. Okay, that's just fun stuff. Now we'll get back to the lesson. This morning we covered several things, and we'll pick back up. We covered 4 points, and we'll cover 4 more tonight. The title is How to Comply with the Command to Consider. All the way through the Bible, you find this word, consider. And it's used in 97 verses. So that's a whole lot of God saying consider. We better consider what consider means. I'm just talking about how you consider. So the first point we saw was consider collaterally. That is, as a group. There he was talking about the nation of Israel. So as the whole group, we're considered a special group. And God does special things for us, and we have special responsibilities to Him. We're also supposed to consider completely, in totality. By that, we covered a bunch of verses. You had to go back and get the video. I can't cover all the verses. Then we said you are to consider God's contingency plan. Based on what you decide to do is the way He moves. He said He's going to reward every man according to his works. So God's got a contingency for whatever man cooks up. The final point we had this morning was to consider your clique. You've got a group of people that you associate with. You've got like personalities that just attract. And so you need to consider that group. Is that group heading toward God, or is it heading toward the devil? Because a companion of fools gets destroyed. And I know I can guarantee you are the smartest one in the group. I can guarantee that. But the question is the rest of the group a fool? Then don't be their companion. Okay, so find some good people to make your clique. Okay, our next point, and where we'll start tonight, point 5, is consider your accountability. You are accountable. Now that's the thing the world hates. Don't tell me I'm accountable to somebody. I'll do whatever I want to do. No, we have an accountability. 2 Kings 5, verse 7. 2 Kings 5, 7. He says, "And it came to pass, when the king of Israel had read the letter, that he rent his clothes and said, Am I God, to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore, consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me." Okay. So, this is Naaman. Naaman's got leprosy. The king of, is it Assyria or Syria? Syria. Okay, Syria, just north of Israel. Okay, the king of Syria sends down an ambassador and says, "Hey, look, I know you can heal this man. When this letter gets there, take my man and do whatever needs to be done so he's healed of leprosy." The king says, "Hey, wait a minute. I'm not God. I can't heal that man." But wait a minute. Who's the king of Israel accountable to? God. The fact of the matter is, this was something in life he should have considered. This man is wanting something only God can do, and this man doesn't know God. It's my turn to introduce him to God. And he didn't get it. He should have considered that. But instead he says, consider, they're picking on me. Maybe it's about somebody bigger than you. A request for the impossible is a cry to meet God. And that's what ends up happening. Good thing is Elijah or Elisha. The second, so it must be Elisha. We should consider our accountability. We're accountable to God. Now, the rest of the world doesn't understand that. And the rest of the world doesn't understand this. They're accountable to God too. They really are. And they crave the knowledge of that. They don't realize they do, but they really do. Just like children, they don't think they crave this, but they do. They crave correction. If you don't correct your child, he becomes wild and he doesn't know what's allowed or what's not allowed. You have to set some boundaries. They had a town out west somewhere where they had all these bears that were taking over the town. And they had a guy who was a crack shot hunter. And they brought him in as the head marksman. He was going to take care of all these bears. He said, let me do this first. Let me see if I can train the bears not to mess with the people. And train the people not to mess with the bears. What they found out was the bears love a rule. They like to know where the boundary is. Once they know the boundary, then they'll adhere to it if you're consistent. And so here's this town that has bears and people all living together. Now, I think all that's stupid. I'd have killed them all anyway, but whatever. Okay. You understand the point. What he said was this. Dead bears don't learn any lessons. And if a mom or a dad bear comes along and learns we can't cross the road here. Every time we do, we get in trouble. They shoot that pepper spray at us or fire off some guns, and he had all this equipment he used. Then they learn, don't go there, and then that passes on to the babies. The babies pass it on to their babies, and it continues to generate. Well, those kids, I call them kids, the bears, the cubs, they really do crave to know what is allowed and what is not allowed. So do people. God is who we're accountable to. And guess what? They're not going to find that unless you tell them. The king of Syria did the right thing. He went to the king of Israel. He knew about God. But the king of Israel was so scared and perplexed that he didn't give him the right message. Well, good thing the prophet comes along and says, I know God, even if you don't. Bring him down here, I'll show him something. Okay, we need to be in place. Not only do we need to be accountable, but we need to tell everybody else they're accountable, and we got the answer. The next thing, did I give you the next thing? No, okay. The next thing is we should consider your classification. Psalms chapter 8, verse 3. Now, if you're saved, you're classified as a son of God. You're his child. Now, don't get the big head too quick. The more you learn about him, the more you learn you're dragging what Christ has made new right through the mud many times. He says in Psalms 8, verse 3, when I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, or the son of man that thou visitest him? When you find out who you really are in comparison to who God is, it doesn't make you get proud and puffed up. It makes you say, just like everybody who's ever seen God, whoa, you really don't need to be around me, I'm not clean. What is man? What is man? We think about it. What is man that God would condescend to come down and give us anything? We better be very happy that he gives us the rules. What is man? Man's a nothing. Man's basically just filth. He says, all man's righteousness are as but filthy rags. That's your good stuff. God says it's filthy rags. Now, he's done something special. If you're saved, he's put his Holy Spirit in you. Christ in you, the hope of glory. Now, that's something real special. What's man that God would do that for me? Now you get a good view of who God is. It'll make you serve him and fear him like we saw earlier. Okay, the next thing we need to do is consider the cause. Consider the cause. When life happens, consider the cause. Isaiah chapter 57. Isaiah 57 verse 1. Isaiah 57, 1. It says, the righteous perisheth, and no man layeth it to heart, and the merciful men are taken away, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. You know, there's been a bunch of good, I know everybody can nitpick and find things they don't like about somebody, but there's been some good preachers who've recently died. Are they taken out of the way for the evil to come? Could be. Could be. Consider it. Watch out. This world is getting wicked. And every day it seems like I see more and more of it. Maybe they were taken out because there's more evil to come. And we know the Antichrist is going to come eventually. And his time could be getting near. We should consider that. Consider when a righteous man dies, it might be God saying, hey, I don't want you to see this wickedness. You remember when Enoch was taken out. Why'd God take Enoch out? He said so he wouldn't, well, let's find it. I can't come up with the verse immediately. Genesis 5:24. This is how to be real prepared right here. Genesis 5:24. Okay, so do you see why Enoch left? Okay, why was he taken? Doesn't say, does it? We better read more Bible. Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews 11, verse 5. He gives us a reason here. He says, "By faith Enoch was translated that he should uh, not see death, and was not found because God translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony that he pleased God." He says there that he translated him so that he would not see death. Wait a minute. You mean to tell me he never saw anybody die? Maybe not. They lived hundreds of years back then. But you know what? If he had not been taken when he was taken, you know who he would have seen die? The whole planet. That's Noah's day. So God took him out before the evil to come, the flood. God does that with his men. So the people around there in Noah's day should have taken warning. Enoch's not around here anymore. We better straighten up. No, tell him what God's going to do now. Enoch was probably holding back a lot of wickedness. Okay, so that's our point on considering the cause. We need to consider sometimes God takes his children on home. That we should also consider somebody needs to take their place. Somebody needs to step in. Now, good thing Noah took his place. Noah was a righteous man. Otherwise, God had destroyed the whole mess. He's always just finding one here, one there. Can you be the one? You can if you choose to. He says the next thing we'll see in our passage is we need to consider there will be a certain, a sure consideration. You can count on it. One day all of mankind will obey God's command to consider. But at that point it's too late. Jeremiah 23, verse 20. Jeremiah 23:20. He says, "The anger of the Lord shall not return until he have executed, and till he have performed the thoughts of his heart. In the latter days ye shall consider it perfectly." He said you had a chance to do it, and you didn't consider. Well, when the judge shows up and starts handing out sentences, at that point you'll consider it perfectly. Well, guess what? It's easier to do it on your own right now than when the judge shows up. Now, this is an important verse. Look at verse 24. "The fierce anger of the Lord shall not return until he have done it, and until he have performed the intents of his heart. In the latter days ye shall consider it." So it's a fact, just plain as black and white, getting right there. He says one day you're going to consider this, and it'll be too late. There's a bunch of things in the Bible that says what we're to consider. I've not covered those. There's a bunch of other things in the Bible that says how to consider that I've not covered. I'm leaving that to you. There's lots of homework you can do. So that's all I've got for you. Just consider. Consider now before it's too late. Because one day, when we get to the judgment, your mind will suddenly be perfect. Even the heathen, when they stand before God, he's going to give them a perfect mind. And at that point, they'll consider perfectly. But you know what? There's nothing they can do about it. You know why they consider perfectly? Because they'll be in agreement. Yes, I deserve hell. And that's a fact. They'll know they go there. You find the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man doesn't say, "Get me out of hell." He knows he deserves it. He understands perfectly at that point. What he says is, "Don't let anybody else come." They'll understand at that point. We've got plenty of time right now to consider this life and to consider it correctly according to what the Bible says.